Today is the 28th of January 2016. We are talking to Jack Krasner, yes, in the project of the World Zionist Organization. In this special project that we document the generation of Tashach 1948, and we concentrate on Jewish soldiers that fought in the Second World War. Jack, I would like to know a little bit about your background. First, when were you born? I mentioned it already, but where were you born? Tell me a bit about your parents.
I was born in the year 1926 in April in Newark, New Jersey. And I lived there all my life, and I've lived in New Jersey all my life. My parents had 4 children before I was born, but 3 hours after I was born, my twin sister was born.
What's her name and what's
Ruth,
the name
her name is Ruth, and she's still living. She lives in New Jersey in a town called Manchester. It's near Lakewood, New Jersey. So.
And your other brothers, their name?
My the eldest child was named Sarah, and she had 2 children, and one lives in Vermont and has 3 children, and her other son lives in Haifa. He made Aliyah in about 1970 with his 5 children, I think 5, and they're all living in Israel. They've all served in the service. And so anyway, what happened was my father was ailing, and he died when I was 6 going on 7. So my mother was a widow with 6 children.
How did she manage?
It was tough. My my brother, who was 13 years older than me, was already working. He had left school and he was working to help out the finances because my father was sick. And in those days, there was no Social Security, there was no unemployment insurance, health, it was just incredible. But somehow we managed. I started working myself when I was 12 years old, delivering newspapers, and when I was 13, I got a good job in a supermarket. So
you still were at school. You were.
Oh yes, I was at school, and and my sister Ruth worked in a supermarket too. She was a cashier, and everybody and my 2 other sisters worked, and so we managed. We slept together. In fact, when I went in the Navy, the interviewer said, how much money do you give to your mother, from working? And actually, I had 3 jobs at the time, and I used to give my mother the money from 2 jobs and keep 1 for myself. So anyway, I thought that the Navy would give my mother some money because I wasn't working anymore and wasn't at home, but they said because my 3 sisters were working that she was managing.
When were you recruited to the Army, the American Army, or to the Navy?
I wasn't actually recruited.
Yeah.
I knew that when I was 18 years old, I would be drafted. So I preferred going into the Navy, which seemed to be a nicer.
Why? Why did you think the Navy is a better place?
It seemed like it was a more more private. You had you were on a ship. You were with one spot, and you stayed. You didn't have to march places and things like that. So I thought it would be, and primarily, as I mentioned, the one of my high school friends who lived across the street had gone into the Navy, and he became a radio operator, and because he had a typing skill, and so did I, so I also applied for radio school. In fact, I have most of my stuff in America, but here's a picture of when I graduated radio school. I don't know if you could find me, but I'll point it out.
So when you were drafted, how old were you?
Well, I enlisted. I was not drafted.
Okay.
And I was 17, but by the time I got my uniform on, I was already 18 years old and 1 week.
So that was the proper time.
Yes, yeah. So it worked out well.
So how was the beginning? How did it?
Well, when you join the Navy, they send you to a training place. It's called boot camp.
Yes.
And I spent something like 7 weeks in a place called Sampson, New York, and it was just a training period.
Yes.
There weren't too many Jewish people there, just in my group, but there were a couple, not too many, but a few.
But you told me before that your mother was Orthodox.
Yes.
What did you do, let's say, for kosher food, or for how did you feel as a Jew being in the Navy or being in?
Well, I had drifted myself away. I mean, I used to go to shul and put on tefillin.
Yeah.
But when I started to work, I started drifting into eating treif and so forth. I remember when I had to work on Shabbat, it was a problem because but it was parnassa, so that's the way we thought about it. And then my mother used to make sandwiches for me to eat, because I used to work on Shabbat from like 7 o'clock in the morning till 11 o'clock at night. And my mother was old-fashioned, and she made everything herself. So she made pita. It's like challah. It's just a thick bread, and she cut real thick slices, and she put chicken fat on it, schmaltz we call it, and chicken. And when I had that sandwich, it was so dry, it was so hard to eat. But I still remember it. So gradually I got to eating, because I worked in a supermarket in delicatessen and dairy areas, so I couldn't help nashing, So little by little I drifted away.
Yeah, so it was no problem for you?
It was not a problem, no.
And other Jews, did they keep kosher?
No, nobody kept kosher, but we did take off for Yom Kippur.
Yeah.
they gave us the day off for Yom Kippur. And
so first you were exercising, what, yes?
training and boot camp. And then I had a few, like a week off, and I was able to come home.
Yeah.
And then they sent you back to the same place, and to what they called the outgoing unit. We was outgoing unit, OGU. We used to call it Only God Understands, because you came back to a place and you didn't know where you're going to go, to a school or to the European theater, on a ship, or to the Pacific theater. Anyway, I wound up being sent to this school, this radio operator school, and that took 5 months.
And what was the training for 5 months? Do you remember the daily? What did you do every day? How did it start?
You always had...
What time did you get up for such a mission?
You always had physical training.
Yeah.
I mean, that was and it's a funny thing about you're asking why I selected the Navy, because, as I said, I came from a very poor background, and consequently, I never went swimming. I never went to a pool or to an ocean or anything like that, because nobody would take me, and nobody could afford it. So consequently, I didn't know how to swim, and I went into the Navy. So
didn't they ask you at least if you can't swim?
So we went to exercises, to
Yes.
swimming, and I told them I couldn't swim. And so they made you jump into the deep water, and if you were getting ready to drown, they knew you couldn't swim, and they gave you a pole to hold on to. So anyway, the bad part was that after you did all your programs for the day, you had to go back at night to take swimming lessons. So I don't know, I never really could learn to swim. I don't know if somebody said my body wasn't that buoyant, but but anyway, what the test was, you had to jump into the water and swim 50 yards back and forth and back again. And that, if you did that, you passed the test. You didn't have to go for lessons. So when you're 18 years old, you could do anything. I mean, and even though I couldn't kick or synchronize my body, I could move my arms enough to swim the distance, It was.
But it needed a lot of courage.
Well, it came naturally. It's just something they had to do. What the courage afterwards were, after I qualified and I took part with the rest of the group in the training exercise, one of the things you had to do was jump in the pool and swim to a diving platform, which was 15 feet and 10 feet in the air near the ceiling, and the 15 feet water, so it really looked high when you're on top of it. And to get to the platform, there was a cargo net. It's something you could climb up, like a big rope netting, and then when everybody was assembled on top of the platform, the instructor would blow a whistle, and then you would have to step off and take your trousers off and blow them up so they would be like a life preserver. You can't jump off, because if you were on a ship and the ship was going down, and if you jumped off, you might hit your head on something. But if you stepped off, then if you broke your foot, it's not the end of the world, but you broke your head, it's the end. So anyway, the funny part was, talking about courage, I knew I wouldn't have any courage if I stayed on that platform, waiting for guys to jump off. So I was the last person to swim across and climb up to the top of the platform, and the first one off. that you talk, it's, sechel, just something that, and so, I managed somehow.
The guys were helping to each other.
They were nice.
What was the atmosphere?
It was. Everybody was in the same position, and they got along. There was no anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
It was a strange group because it was in 1944, the beginning of 44, and it was like the war in Europe ended a year later, and it was like the war had been going on for 4 years already.
What did you know about the war? What did you know about the situation of Jews in the east of Europe? Did you hear about, let's say, the Warsaw Ghetto or the uprising of the Warsaw Ghetto, or Jews are being killed, taken to camps? Did you know anything about it? Did people talk about it?
I'm ashamed to say I didn't know. It was just something. I mean, we knew about Hitler and his genocide program, but we didn't think it was focused just on the Jews. It's such a shame. It's unbelievable that it's funny, just to jump ahead a little bit, after the war, after I was discharged, I got a job driving a bakery truck, and I used to deliver cakes and packaged stuff to groceries in the neighborhood. And it was in 1948, and the war in Israel was taking place. And most of the grocers in the neighborhood were Polish. And they said, "What are you doing here? How come you're not in Israel, fighting for..."
You did not mention about your mother being a Zionist or anything like that.
She was an Orthodox, but she didn't talk about Israel.
Yeah. Let's go back to your service.
Yes.
Yeah. So you in which countries in the States?
Well, and I was in upstate New York, near Canada, and then that's where I spent my time in the radio school. And in January of 45, I graduated radio school, and I was sent to Virginia to be trained in the amphibious division of radio school. Amphibious, you familiar with that?
Maybe we will tell us.
The part of the Navy that used to send their ships up on the beach, and the front of the ship would open up and the tanks and the soldiers would come out. So that was the part of the Navy that I was assigned. And after I was there for a little while, I was assigned to a ship.
Uh-huh.
Now, the ships that I was on, the LSTs, they didn't have names. They just had numbers. this is the ship that I was on, and they were what you call expendable. In other words, if they did one mission, they paid for themselves because they weren't that expensive to build, and they weren't that big, 315 feet. So consequently, they just turned them out. And the ship that I was assigned to, would you believe it, was number 1, LST number 1. And
how many people were there?
there's 135 people on the ship. But that ship had been in Europe, and it was back. And because it was number 1 and it had served in Europe, it was decided that that ship was going to be like a fundraising ship. It would go around to different seaports through the country and say, this is the number 1 of all the LSTs. And I was really disappointed because I didn't want to spend my time in the United States. I felt that's not right. So anyway, the ship went down, left Virginia where I was stationed, and it went through the Panama Canal, and then it came into Houston, Texas for repairs, and it stayed there for close to a month, I think, and I had a very nice time. I was hanging around with all these men that had served, and I was just a newcomer. But it's funny when you said I look young, because at that time, like when I came home from the Navy, in my first visit home after having the training camp for 7 weeks, I got off the train before it got to the station. It was a 7-hour trip to the station in Newark, but I lived on the outskirts of Newark. So when the train stops to change engines, I got off, and I could walk home from there. It was a lot easier.
After separating from your family
Yeah.
for how long?
7 weeks.
7 weeks.
But the funny part of it is, I had a pack, and I would walk home, and the ladies, who would see me in the street would almost start bawling because, here's a 14-year-old kid, walking home and something like that. But it turned out, okay.
Yeah.
So anyway, what happened was the ship was being refurbished, Shippuden and so forth, so that then it left from Houston, Texas to go to Galveston, Texas to New Orleans. And it was not in use for a month, and then it got all fresh food and supplies. And there were only 2 radio operators on the ship so he worked 4 hours, and then he was off for 4 hours, and the same with me. 4 hours working and 4 hours off. And the food was unfortunately contaminated, and I got food poisoning. So I had to get off the ship when it got to New Orleans. I couldn't stop, I was throwing up, and I was working 4 hours on, 4 hours off, because there was no choice. Anyway, so I was in a hospital in New Orleans for a couple of weeks. And then I was assigned to the base in New Orleans. And it's funny, when I was in the hospital, the Jewish women in New Orleans found out somehow that I was Jewish, and they came to visit me. So when I heard they were coming, I would go into another room or another direction, because I didn't want a Jewish woman to come up and say, I mean, I was no hero. I was just schlepping along, with the flow. And I was just sort of ashamed that they would want to see me. And
so did you meet them?
No, I never met them, I didn't want any kavod, because I didn't do anything. Anyway, while I was in New Orleans, I got assigned to this ship, the 1059,
Yes.
and there were 3 people on the ship. Myself, a radio operator, and another man from Chicago who was a yeoman, and who do you think the third man was? The captain. Go figure. Anyway, the captain had one of those complexes where the Jews are not good fighters, they're not doing enough, and so forth. So he had to prove that he was
the best.
Yeah. So as soon as we could get a couple of ships together, we would go to we head out to the Pacific. We would go to another island, Saipan, Inuitak.
What assignments? What plans were?
We were looking for the enemy.
Yeah.
Supposedly there were submarines there, but no submarine's going to attack a little ship like this. They're going to go after a destroyer or something like that. So anyway, we never got into any fighting, because by the time we got there, the fighting was over. So finally, we got to an island, a big island in the Pacific called Guam. And this was it. We were going to be part of a big operation that was going to invade Japan. And that's when they dropped the atom bomb on Japan, and then the second atom bomb, and then the war was over. So so that's it.
Yeah, but still, being on the ship?
On the ship, I was fortunate in that I was a radio operator, and so I was like in touch with the world. But most of the duties, most of the messages were coded messages. Yes. And they weren't the way the message comes over the radio, and you listen and you see if it's for you or not. Every day your code changes. Like it's usually like 4 letters, like NAFX. And if NAFX is not in the salutation of the message, it's not for you. So you're required to copy maybe a couple of sentences, and then you could stop and listen. You took the earphones off and put them around your neck, so you had to listen in case an emergency broke through. And so that's what, basically that's and then we, I remember when I got the news, like when Franklin Roosevelt died, the president, I was like the...
Yeah, but for example, what did you know at that time about what was going in Japan? With the atom
I didn't
bomb.
have an overall comprehensive picture. Just had a very limited viewpoint of my duties on the ship.
Without knowing.
Without knowing, yes.
Without knowing.
Yeah.
Without having any rumors or anything like that.
No, it's unbelievable, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, an adult man not knowing what's going on. Well, I didn't read there were no newspapers to read. There was no mention on the radio frequencies. So I just...
Nothing was mentioned on the radio.
I remember when I was growing up, there was an article in the Reader's Digest called Address Unbekannt. It was a little short story about a man who was taken to a camp in Germany, and then they looked for him and they said they don't know where he lives anymore. You know, address unbekannt. But so I had a feeling, but for some reason I didn't internalize it. Isn't that disgusting?
No, the question is, you also did not know anything about what's going on in Japan? In Japan?
In Japan, no.
Nothing.
I mean,
About that.
I tell you, the atrocities of the Japanese became more obvious from movies, you know, from the little of the movies we saw. But the thing was, after the war was over, because our ship was had a very narrow draft. In other words, it could go into shallow waters. We were assigned to the United Nations Relief Association, and we took Japanese people from China and brought them back to Japan. See, the bottom of the ship, the hold, was a huge empty spot. That's where the soldiers in the tanks used to stay before the amphibious attack, before the landing. And so there was a big space, and we had we took Koreans back from China to Korea, 1,000 people. There were 4 children born on, it was a 4-day voyage, and 4 children, I remember, were born on one trip. So, and then we took, so I visited Japan, I visited Korea, and I visited parts of China, Beijing, and because our ship took very little water, we went up the Yangtze River and to Nanking and Hankow, and I rode up the river, and I would look out at the rail and see these bamboo castles, and I remembered as a child reading these stories written by W. Somerset Maugham, and I said, I'm here, I can't believe it. And you know what else was strange? The fellow I told you about that lived across the street and it was in the Navy, became a radio operator, he was on a battleship, and his ship was in Shanghai, China, and my ship was in Shanghai, China, and the fellow who lived next door to me was on an ocean-going tug, and his ship was in Shanghai, China. So these three Jewish guys from a very poor neighborhood in Newark, can you imagine sitting in a bar in Shanghai, China, you know, having a beer? It was just anyway, we went down, we also covered South, what they call it, French Indochina. They call it Vietnam now. And so we went there. So I tell you.
And how were you well received?
What?
Where were you well received in those places?
Well, yeah. I mean, but you know, I regret things. Like I should have found out if there was a shul in Shanghai, because I know there were some Chinese Jews, and I know there were Russians who escaped from escaped from Germany through China and Russia, and so. But I just shallow person. But anyway, so I spent maybe a year, and I became a third-class petty officer. That's like a sergeant, and I finished up service a little over 27 months, and I was back.
What year was that?
That was 46, July of 46, and then I was I was hanging around for a little bit. The government gave each veteran $20 a week for a year. We used to call it the 52-20 club, because 52 weeks for $20. And I would hang around. I remember one funny incident. I was telling my daughter today that we lived in a house that had 3 apartments, and we were in the middle, and the landlord lived on the top floor, and the landlord used to buy newspapers, and I was in the habit of going upstairs on his back porch and getting the old issues and reading them, and so it was a Friday morning, and I was reading the paper on the back porch, and my mother said, "Jack, could you go pick up the meat from the butcher?" So I said, "Sure." And she, a little while later, she came out. I was still reading. She said, "Jack, don't forget the butcher." I said, "Okay." And the third time she came out, you know, she's, "Jack, you have to go because I won't have time to kosher the meat." So I said to her, "So one time you won't kosher it." And she laughed, you know, it was such a funny thing. But anyway.
If I will ask you about what did it give you serving in the Navy? What did it?
Well, it was.
Did it change you in a way? Did it? You went to.
It was an incredible experience for a poor boy that had never been any place or traveled any place.
So the traveling itself.
It was amazing.
Was amazing.
And then also, I think it strengthened me, you know, taught me self-reliance, because I was a very son of a shelter. Even though I've been working all my life, I was sheltered. I never went any place. And also, I had to get over my seasickness, you know. So overall, I think it helped me, and I felt that I had done my duty to this wonderful country of America that accepted my family, and you know, I just thought it was the most wonderful country in the world, and I was glad to, as a Jewish person, to have done what I was supposed to do, and so I was sort of loafing around for a couple of weeks, and then another friend of mine from high school came out and came over the house and said, you know, the government is willing to send you to college. You know, it's called the GI Bill, where they would finance your college. So he said, it's like someone giving you $5,000, you know. So in where I lived, there was a division of the state university, Rutgers University. So I went down to take the examination, and I passed. I was surprised, but I had to go back to high school because I didn't have all the college subjects. I took the business, so I went. So I was driving the bakery truck at the time, and one of the things that I had to do before getting okayed for college is to meet with a psychologist from the Newark College of Engineering to see if I qualified to be a college student. And he gave me all kinds of tests, and he said these tests you take for one afternoon a week for 3 weeks, and then he evaluates the test and decides what you should study, what should be your career, and so forth. So I said to him, I cannot take 3 afternoons off 3 weeks in a row. I said, you have to give me all the tests at one time. So he reluctantly agreed and gave me the tests. And then the tests were like, would you rather build a bridge or sell the bridge or I don't know, work on the bridge? So those kind of psychological questions. And when he finished, it was already dark, and he came out and he said to me, you should be a YMCA director. You know what that is? The Y, it's, we have a Y here in Jerusalem. It's like a community center. Yeah. So I looked at him. I said, are you kidding? I said, I signed up for Rutgers night college because I'm working during the day. They only have 3 choices: finance, marketing, or accounting. And I figured finance and marketing sounds like too general a field. Accounting was like a skill, a profession. So I signed up for that. So the psychologist says, no, you should be a YMCA director. I said, could you put accounting second? So he agreed. And that's how come I became an accountant. And eventually, 6.5 years, I went to college at night. And I found out that I didn't have the right subjects for taking the CPA exam. And so as long as I had to take extra subjects and the government was paying for it, I took it in graduate school. So after 9.5 years, I had a master's degree, and I became an accountant. I left the truck and became an accountant and eventually a CPA.
Before, I want to take you back to 1948, when the Jewish state was recognized.
Right.
Was it an important event for you?
It was a very important event because I was single and I was wondering, maybe I should go there, you know? I mean, maybe they need me, maybe, but I didn't. I just didn't get moved enough. I just feel bad about it when I think about it now. But it was,
But I would like just as an event, As an
event, I thought it was just remarkable. Mm-hmm. And I was so proud, you know, that it happened. But I didn't realize the background and the problems, you know, that existed. Yeah. You know, the history of it.
And when did you hear the first time about the tragedy of people, the Holocaust, what we call now?
I think around 48, you know, the
48 only, not in 46 or
maybe 46, 47, but I
can imagine it was a kind of a shock to you.
It was a shock, but again, it seemed removed, unfortunately.
Even then, in 1948.
It seemed removed. And now that I think about it, I realize how removed our diaspora Jews are, you know, about the situation in Israel, that they can just go about their business even though anti-Semitism is growing throughout the world, you know.
Did you experience anti-Semitism? I talk about when you were in service, in the Navy, in...
Sometimes there was a remark.
Like what? I don't want to depend on Jews if I get stuck, in a tight spot, things like that. Or I remember some man from Georgia who said he thinks he's a better man than the captain because the captain was Jewish. But there was a little anti-Semitism when I was growing up. Like when my father died, my brother was working, so my mother wanted me to say Kaddish, so I went to shul every day, and I used to have to pass a Catholic school, and they would, taunt me, and try to frighten me. And but every day I went to shul to say Kaddish, and the congregation in the morning minyan were all older men, and after the service it was customary for them to have a little schnapps, and they always gave me a couple of drops, and my mother always gave me a penny to put in the pushka, because during the service, the afternoon service, they would pass the pushka around, and I always put a penny in. And one day, some well-to-do relatives from Philadelphia visited us, and the man gave me a nickel. And the next day, when I went to shul,
I held the nickel up, you know, like so the sun should shine on it, and I was going to drop it into the pushka, and the men wouldn't let me drop it in. They said, buy some ice cream or something. So anyway,
Tell me briefly what happened after that. When did you get married?
Well, as I was working and going to school at night, so I had a pretty active night, and I didn't actually graduate till I was around 30, you know, and took the CPA exam and so forth. So then, but I didn't get married actually till I was 33.
At that time, it was quite an age to get...
It's an age for any time, you know, though I don't know, maybe people are getting married later now, but I was 33 and I met my wife, Bobby, in a place in upstate New York where single people used to go. So, and it worked out. I mean, she's from New York, and I'm from New Jersey, and we're different personalities, but we got along great. We've been married 56 years, and we're so blessed.
And how many children?
We have 3 children and 9 grandchildren and 1 great-grandchild. And it's just, and they're all wonderful. You know, when my wife and I got married in 1959, Bobby doesn't come from a religious home, and but she agreed that she would keep the house kosher. But
because you did not keep kosher.
I did not
many
keep
years.
kosher, right?
So,
but we would keep the house kosher.
you wanted to
So that when Mama came over, she could eat, you know, and things like. And we just wanted to have a kosher Jewish home. And then when the kids start growing up, I realized that if I wanted them to be good Jews, I had to set an example. So I became a kashrut observer again. I mean, not 100% in the extent when we would go out to a restaurant, it wasn't strictly kosher, but I would only have fish, or else I would have eggs, you know, something like that. In fact, sometimes we would stop at a restaurant on a trip, and Bobby would say, I have to run into the restaurants to see if they have fish for Daddy. But believe it or not, the kids, one after another, adopted kashrut. And, you know, when they were children, like 9 years old, 10 years old, they each adopted kashrut. And then Bobby used to eat chicken, and then she stopped with that, and she's a kashrut observer now too. So, actually, I also started attending shul, which was easy for me because I was familiar with it, and I remember as an accountant, there's a period called the tax season where all the tax returns are due. So accountants work 6-7 days a week sometimes. So Shabbat they would work, but I would not work on Shabbat. I would work on Sunday instead, so I can go to shul on Shabbat.
You even eventually made an aliyah?
Yeah, well, my daughter made Aliyah first, and then my son made Aliyah. But he was here for 6 years, and he went back to the U.S. for a little more education, and he met a wonderful girl. They got married, and he's very successful now in New York, and that's it. But I don't know. They have 3 children. They're Orthodox. They're very observant, and my daughter-in-law teaches in a Orthodox day school, and all the kids attend Orthodox schools. So who knows? Maybe something. She was here for a year. And she had an apartment on Lincoln Street. It's near Karen Hayesod. I told her I'm looking to see if they have any new apartments available. I'll let her know, and so forth.
How did you adapt, both of you, to Israel?
We loved it. We came here for our 20th anniversary in 1979, and we just loved the place. And then I think our daughter she was attending her sophomore year in Israel. Most students go in their junior year, they take a year in Israel at Hebrew University. She went as her sophomore year. And then when we picked, but in those days, in 1979, things were pretty primitive. In other words, there were no telephones. You communicated by telegram almost. So, but she loved it. And then instead of going back to Columbia, where she was going to school, she went to back to Hebrew University, and she's been here ever since. And she's been working for the Israel Museum for 25 years. She had a lot of different jobs until she worked out, and she's got now she went back and got a master's degree in archaeology. So we're very, very happy with her, and we decided to, as I mentioned, we're going back to America next month to sell our apartment because we decided to spend the rest of our life here.
So if I will ask you about your identity, you were a very patriotic American Jew.
Yeah.
What do you feel now? Are you Israeli more, American more? It's a question always the Jews deal with.
Yeah, I just feel that my wife and I are taking a tiny part in the greatest miracle in the whole world. I just can't tell you how important it is to us, and I was reading an article in the Hadassah magazine about a woman who was in Tel Aviv, and she was in a gift shop and looking at it, thing, and it said Am Yisrael Chai, and the storekeeper said, nobody believes in that anymore, and so forth. What are you, a rightist, or something like that? I mean, I don't know. I suppose there are people in Tel Aviv or throughout the country. I mean, you hear about such people like Avraham Berg and some of our other leaders that took crazy routes, but overall, we're we're very supportive, and we're so happy that life has channeled us this way.
Wonderful. We really thank you.
There's nothing to thank. And, all my life I've been telling people there's nothing to thank, something like that.
Yeah, but we thank you for telling your story.
Oh, yeah. I know I spoke to another guy that might be on your list, Malcolm Schrader. I don't know if you know the name. Now, he was in 5 battles in the Army, so he's going to be he's such a nice person. He'll be a wonderful guy. And but I remember a woman calling me up. I don't know if it was you or not, but I told her that I really not a hero, and I'm too embarrassed to be interviewed, but if you want to spend the time, I'm happy to cooperate,
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Right. This is the graduation picture in January of 1945 at Sampson, and I'm in the second row, and very happy to finish the course and not dropped out and been able to successfully complete it and get the promotion that came with the course to a first-class seaman. The funny part about it is that the naval base where I took the course and where I was trained was on a lake, a Seneca Lake in upstate New York near Canada. And after some time, maybe 20 years later, it became a campground, a natural park where people would come with their tents and stay there and visit. It was a beautiful area. And I think it was in 1970, 75, I used to keep in touch with the members of my ship. There was a man who would send out a bulletin once or twice a year, and then there was a reunion. And they had a reunion in upstate New York near Cornell University, a nice little town. And Bobby and I decided to go up to the reunion. And when we drove to the motel where we were going to stay, and they had made reservations, some man came out of a car with a big belly and tattoos on his arm. And Bobby said, I'm not going to a reunion with that guy and those people. But anyway, I talked her into it. We went, and we weren't able to go to places with them because we were kashrut observers, so we went on our own a little bit. And one of the things we did, we took a ride up to Seneca Lake to see the old camp, the old training base. And they had, it was a campground now, but they had a whole hall devoted to the past naval people that were there. And Bobby found our picture, on the wall. So that was a funny part. And we had a pretty good time at the reunion, right? Yeah. Let me try.
Where are you in the picture?
In the picture, I'm in the second row. And
Okay, I'll just point it.
right there, right.
Okay.
That's the LST 1059, and it might have been taken in Shanghai, or we were on the river a lot. We would we would anchor alongside the river, and it looks very big from here, but it's not too big a ship. As I said, it's only 315 feet. One time when our ship was in the Pacific, we went to Pearl Harbor in the Hawaii Islands, and they had a course for radio operators, and the men on the there were two small boats on top of our ship, and the men took me ashore on the small boat and said they would meet me at 5 o'clock, when the program was over, and we never met. So consequently, I got into somebody else's little boat, and we rowed around Pearl Harbor. And if you're on the water and you look up and you see those battleships and how tall they are, it's a scary experience. But I found our ship someplace along the line. I was, okay, right. I just want to mention that, those things happen. Like we were in Nanking, and we were going to have a Liberty that's like a few hours off, and as a treat, we were each given some cans of beer, which we put in the water, to keep cold. And then after, there was nothing to do there. It was like deserted. And so we came back when we were waiting for a ride back to our ship, which was in the middle of the Yangtze River, and we got
Dina.
two guys and I. We got tired of waiting, so there was a little junk there. That's a little Chinese ship where they propel it by using the rudder. They work it back and forth. Well, we got into that little ship, and it was only maybe 300 yards away, and we figured it'd be nothing. But the current at the end of the day on the Yangtze River was so strong that instead of getting closer, we got further away. And finally, we had to climb off the ship, and we just waited. And around midnight, they sent another ship, another boat looking for us. Anyway, little adventures,